numbers, and this is the line. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. And goes. And goes. And goes.
I saw this video on Twitter recently of Asian people in Chinatown right here in New York City lining up for what appears to be blocks in order to get pepper spray if the person filming this video is to be believed, due to the incidents of violence against Asian that are becoming more and more common in this country. Now, I'm going to talk about this. I want to go over this. This video is sponsored. It's kind of a video that has a bunch of violent, horrible stories, so I don't want to do my comedic sponsor transition, so we'll roll into that and I'll catch you on the other side. Many people struggle to lose weight, especially after you get past your 20s. This is because every decade after your 20s, your metabolism slows by about 4% a year, so by the time you're 50, that's over 10%. This is one of the reasons why I highly recommend Keto with Justice. This amazing keto powder, you just scoop one little bit of it in your morning beverage, and it can help put you into a fat-burning state known as ketosis. Thousands of people have used this and reported better weight loss, and they don't have to follow the rigidity of the keto diet. KetoWithJustice.com, get yourself this powder, amazing discount over there, KetoWithJustice.com. Ever since the outbreak of COVID-19 right here in the United States of America, the good old USA, attacks on Asians, hate crimes specifically, have been reportedly on the rise, and the media had taken very keen interest in this insofar as they could blame President Trump. Because we all know President Trump identified that this virus originated from China, therefore he was basically commanding his supporters to attack Asians, and for some reason, when he was throwing out these signals to his supporters, largely black Americans responded to those signals, even though statistically, these are the least likely people to be President Trump's supporters. But whatever, we all know it was evil white racism and the long history of white supremacy in the United States of America that led to these attacks. And unfortunately, even though Joe Biden, the savior, the most empathetic man in America, has changed the way we talked about COVID, it doesn't appear that these attacks have halted. Now, I know that people out there in the comments have probably already started typing up this point, so let me just hold this point for a second before we get into today's story. And that is the idea that hate crime enhancements themselves don't make sense. And here's the thing. I agree with you. I understand the argumentation. I'm somebody who believes that the criminal justice system needs to establish two things in order to convict somebody of a crime. Those two things being evil intent, mens rea, and actus rea, which is evil actions. The motivations actually don't matter. I know people say in order to convict somebody of a crime, you need motive, means, and opportunity, but that's just a common phrase that people say, and that's something that can help a jury in determining whether or not somebody is guilty or not. It gives them a picture in their mind, but in reality, you do not have to establish motive in order to establish what you need to convict somebody. All you need to establish is that evil intent and the evil act, and I think when we get into mind reading in the criminal justice system, it's ridiculous. And also, the crimes that get labeled hate crimes versus the crimes that don't get labeled hate crimes, also a bit ridiculous. And on top of that, the idea that you can assault somebody in a minor way, and that through a hate crime enhancement could be taken more seriously than if you assaulted somebody in a more serious way, is a bit ridiculous as well. How many times am I going to say ridiculous in this sentence? Basically a ridiculous amount of times, because I'm being a little bit ridiculous. The second thing that I also want to make 100% clear, because I do think that this should be emphasized more, and sometimes in my videos I leave things that should go without saying, but you know, the internet is the internet, so if I don't say it, somebody will leave it in the comments 800 times. You know who you are. And that is the idea that attacks on Asians, specifically attacks on Asians from black people, are something that is not new in this country. What is new is them being categorized as hate crimes. This was a trend during the Trump administration, and it appears to have carried over. There have always been issues between blacks in America and Asians in America, and one of the big pieces of evidence of that is something I featured in a previous video, which is how people reacted to Asian businesses being burned down, specifically black people, during the LA riots.
Why are we the victims? I mean, my parents are good Christians. I mean, we've been through so much, and to go through this, I mean, everything 22 years down the drain.
Many Koreans who yesterday were the shopkeepers of South Central Los Angeles today have lost the businesses they took years to create.
What can I say? I don't have any word to say. This looks a comeback, John.
George Huang woke this morning to find his mini mall burnt to the ground. A loss of $1.5 million and a lifetime of dreams and effort.
I don't mind that. Whatever they need to take it out. But why they burn out the property? That's my question.
41 Korean businesses in South Central have been torched, dozens looted. In this overwhelmingly black and Hispanic area, Koreans own many of the small businesses. They're insular, they employ their own, they keep to themselves. Blacks say that's the problem.
I'm not surprised that the Koreans got targeted because their prices are high, their attitude is wrong, and they just don't seem to have any respect for the black community.
Now, that's not an isolated incident. This is a well-documented phenomenon. Thomas Sowell has written extensively about the plight of middlemen minorities, not just in the United States, but the world over, and the Asians tend to fill that role in the United States. Thus, they gain all the hatred that is associated with that role, and it's really unfortunate. But that does not mean that all of these instances are actually hate crimes, even though the ones that we're going to talk about today appear to be so. And also, because we don't care whether or not they're hate crimes, what we care about is violent crime. That doesn't really matter in the first place. Now, to be clear, the reason we talk about black crime against Asians is because black people disproportionately commit these crimes against Asians, and it's not a recent phenomenon, it's just a phenomenon that the media refuses to address, and we're going to talk about why that's critical in a few stories. But first, I want to talk about this story because for some reason, people out there who are interested in bad faith criticisms are under the impression that I don't see any stories of white people attacking Asians, or somehow, if a white person attacks an Asian, I'm not condemning that just as badly as a black person attacking an Asian. But there was a story of a guy who got arrested for 7 different instances of assault against Asian women over the course of 2 hours in New York City.
Do you have anything to say?
28-year-old Steven Zajong, seen here being led out of the NYPD's Midtown South precinct last night, was arrested and charged with assault, attempted assault as a hate crime, harassment, and aggravated harassment, after police say he attacked 7 Asian women across Manhattan in under 2 hours.
The idea that this never happens is absurd in every way. What I condemn, the reason I talk about black on Asian crime, is because there is a cult of denial about who is largely responsible for a disproportionate amount of these crimes. Nuance Bro did an entire video of this fake anti-Asian hate organization and their fake research where they determined that in the year 2020, there were only 3 black on Asian violent attacks through the whole year. There was a week where Dion Lim posted, I believe, 3 separate instances of black on Asian murder within that same week in one city, but according to this research that Nuance Bro went into and debunked, there were only 3 violent instances total from black people to Asians, which is absurd in every way. And the way that they came to this conclusion was that they examined news articles and they took note of when race was mentioned in the news articles, and they only found 3 instances of the person being described as a black person throughout the course of 2020. And I believe they were studying New York City because we have a large Asian population. But again, that's absurd in every possible way, and it just goes to show you the cult of denial that is in the media, because the media does not report the race of the perpetrator when they cover these stories. Also, there is another trick that was exposed in Nuance Bro's video, and this research from this fake anti-Asian hate organization that's actually just a far leftist organization meant to provide cover for the people that are actually attacking Asians en masse in the United States of America, where they look at hate instances rather than hate crimes. This is a way of basically inflating what you're looking for in order to skew the numbers. What we're concerned about are assaults, harassment, murders, all these problems, all these actual crimes that actually harm individuals. What we're not concerned about is whether or not somebody got into an argument in a park and may or may not have mentioned something that was anti-Asian during the course of the argument. But what these organizations like to do is inflate incidents, which includes verbal confrontations between people where one of those people happened to be white and one of those people happened to be Asian, with actual crimes that actually occurred. Obviously, one problem is way more significant in the United States. That doesn't mean you should hate Asians for being Asian. That doesn't mean you should say those rude things. But rude things are not equivalent to murder. Rude things are not equivalent to brutal assault. And to be clear, when we're talking about why people are lining up for blocks in order to buy pepper spray because it became available recently in Chinatown, we're not talking about people who are concerned about verbal confrontations in New York City. When these people discuss how they no longer feel safe in the city that they grew up in, they're not talking about the mean words that an old lady said to them during their walk through the park. What they're actually talking about, what they're actually concerned about, are instances like what happened in Yonkers.
Police say the woman pushing the grocery cart in the surveillance video was just trying to unlock her building door when a man came from behind and punched her in the head, knocking her to the ground. We're pausing the video there because what happens next is a hate crime that has horrified even seasoned detectives.
Now, I'm not going to show you the video associated with this instance. I will only show you this still, and the reason I'm not going to show you that is because YouTube terms of service prohibit horrible acts of violence being shown on their channel, and those rules are selectively enforced, so I don't want to get a community guideline strike for this story. However, I will link to the news stories so you guys can witness this for yourself, and I'm going to give you a graphic content warning if you do so.
When police arrived, they found the 67-year-old Asian woman bleeding and severely injured, and the man who attacked her, 42-year-old Tamil Esco, was outside the building. Both victim and suspect lived there.
When you look at the video, this wasn't one or two punches. This was a sustained, continued, horrible attack where there was 120 punches and 7 stomps and then the spitting. I can't imagine anyone else could deduct that this wasn't an attempt to kill her.
Because the incident in question that I'm talking about is an incident of a 67-year-old woman who was wandering into her apartment building when another tenant, who looked like this, obvious white supremacist, decided to sucker punch her, knock her to the ground, and strike her over 100 times with punches, kicks, and stomps. This woman was severely injured by this guy in this seemingly unprovoked attack, and during the course of this vicious assault, he was calling her racial epithets. Apparently, there was something verbal that happened outside, and this guy decided to follow this old lady into the entrance of the apartment and react with this explosion of violence. It's horrific in every way, and this is what we're talking about when we're covering these instances. Had this been a white person, had this been a white guy, this would have been all over the media. This would have been on the Young Turks. Everybody and their mother would have been covering it because of how nasty it is, but because it was a black person, people basically ignored this story. It doesn't become a national story, and the only national figures that cover it are people who are plugged into the internet who are trying to lift this up and elevate it to a national story. If you don't realize that this kind of instance is the reason why people are lining up around the block in New York City for pepper spray, you're not paying attention. Another great instance that we're going to throw over is this guy who was arrested for targeting multiple Asian women for robberies that often got violent. This guy is facing up to 95 years per day during his crime spree.
Tonight we're learning new details about the more than 170 hate crime attacks and robberies and how San Jose police worked with agencies across the Bay Area. ABC 7 News anchor Dion Lim has the story.
Shocking details are now coming to light about the 6 men arrested in a crime spree targeting more than 170 Asian American women in San Jose and across the Bay Area. Many victims preyed upon in parking lots like this one.
This is a major problem across the region, and that county law enforcement has really been unprecedented in the way that they've worked together.
I spoke to Marissa McKeown, supervising Deputy District Attorney of Santa Clara County, who said primary suspect Anthony Robinson, who faces up to 95 years behind bars, targeted multiple Asian women daily. Prosecutors say they were stunned by what he admitted.
When Mr. Robinson was arrested, we were absolutely shocked to find that he admitted that he was deliberately targeting Asian victims on a mistaken and prejudiced belief that they, quote, did not believe in bank accounts.
So this is why I don't really care for hate crime legislation overall, because the reason this guy, according to himself, was targeting Asian women specifically was not necessarily due to the fact that he had a hatred for those women, but it was due to the fact that he believed a stereotype to be true of all Asian people, and that women were more vulnerable. So does this count as a hate crime or not as a hate crime? I don't really care. The effect is, though, this person was on the streets in San Jose robbing multiple different women a day, according to himself, because he thought Asians were easy targets. Again, this is why they're lining up across the street, down the block, in order to get pepper spray. Now, I want to throw it over to one other instance because I think this one is horrific for reasons beyond the insane physical assault that took place against this woman.
5 convictions in the past 5 years, and now a repeat offender is facing new charges for the attack of a woman at a light rail station earlier this month. Just released video of this attack is very difficult to watch. We have edited this thing, but we want to make sure that you know exactly what happened.
March 2nd, the light rail station at the International District. You can see the suspect, Alexander J., coming up the escalator. The victim is in the red jacket, walking up the stairs. When they both get to the top, they walk out of the view of the camera for a moment. When they come back into frame, the suspect is holding the victim on the ground by her coat, and then he throws her down the first flight of stairs. The attack doesn't end there. He follows her to the first landing, grabs her again, throwing her down the next section of stairs, and turns to walk away, but then turns back around and follows her as she tries to get away. The two struggle on the second landing, the woman gripping onto the rail as she kicked and punched. She's finally able to get away.
Now, this story was covered by friend of the channel, Devin Tracy, and one of the things that he emphasized is this woman who was thrown down the stairs by this black dude who ended up having multiple different broken ribs that she needed surgery for. And by the way, he threw her down both these stairs before she eventually got away. Actually gave a description of her attacker to the police immediately. A very detailed description, a description that included the clothes, the skin color, and all the things that you would need to know in order to find this person. However, news stations in Seattle, including the Seattle Times, thought it was a good idea to omit parts of the description given by this woman, despite the fact that they were allegedly quoting this woman, thus making it more difficult for them to find the attacker. By the way, the attacker, of course, was convicted on multiple different felonies, never should have been out in the first place. You guys have heard the drill, progressive DAs, progressive city, you know how it goes down. But during the course of time when the police were looking for this person, during the course of time where more information would have benefited the general population in aiding in capturing this guy, this obviously violent guy who attacked a woman on a staircase, threw her down 2 flights of stairs, broke 3 of her ribs, he ultimately ended up stabbing another person. Now, we'll never know if actually getting the word out would have prevented this stabbing, but what I can tell you for sure is that omitting the guy's description in order to protect some woke vision of the world didn't help anybody. Look, a lot of times it's hard to see how cowardice has an impact, how it has negative consequences. And this is the perfect example of what we're talking about with cowardice actually hurting everyday people. We need to call out media organizations who will refuse to give descriptions of certain suspects while those suspects are violent out in our society, not apprehended, and could potentially offend again, hurting somebody else that was undeserving. It shouldn't be the woke position, the progressive position, that you can't allow people to maybe determine patterns and then develop stereotypes at the expense of actual people's lives. Put the information out there, especially when the person's on the loose, because it is paramount in those situations. Now, I was going to close the video right here. I was going to end it. I covered the stories that I set out to cover. However, it needs to be emphasized to you guys out there in the audience that I don't shoot from a script. I don't write it down, put it in a teleprompter, and read it for you guys. What I actually do is familiarize myself with the stories that I want to talk about, and then at certain points when I feel like I'm not really good on the information, I will look up information during the course of shooting in order to make sure I get the facts right for you guys out there in the audience. And one of the things that I noticed while looking up the specific stories of anti-Asian crimes that I wanted to talk about is how many stories just like it are ones that missed me, ones that I didn't see before. For instance, I looked up the story of the woman being thrown down the stairs at the train station, and I found stories of a woman being pushed in front of a train to her death. a story of an Asian city council candidate being hurled down the stairs right here in New York City, a story of a woman being thrown down the stairs, an Asian woman, 58 years old, and then her going into a coma and never waking up. She died from this instance. So even though I tried to search something very specific, Asian woman attacked in staircase in Seattle, I got multiple different instances of basically the same crime for no reason that happened in this country that you haven't heard about. We can't let this happen to any members of our population. We should not tolerate violence against any group, against any individual for any reason, and we shouldn't be afraid to call out the perpetrators behind the violence. Going soft on crime has consequences. This idea that we shouldn't cover crime has consequences. This idea that we think we're aware, even me, I follow the news all the time. I follow New York local news because I live in New York City, and a bunch of these stories just totally pass by, even though this is a topic I cover, because that's how little attention it gets. Think about all the stories that never even make your local news, let alone the stories that never get blown up to national news, and then you can understand how big of a problem this actually is. And again, whether or not these individual instances are hate crimes is neither here nor there. What is at issue here is that crime is going up in all these major cities, and it's because we've gone soft on crime. We're looking to be empathetic with the criminal rather than with the people who are losing mothers, sisters, brothers, fathers, children. That's what's wrong in this country right now. So yeah, there's a million stories. Every single time I went to search one for a little bit more factual information, I found a story that was almost just like it that happened within the last couple of months that I never heard about. If you want to actually stop Asian hate, maybe do something better than putting your Stop Asian Hate sign next to your Black Lives Matter sign. Maybe call on the media to say, hey, look, when there's a suspect on the loose, when there's a menace to society that could harm other people, we need the description immediately so that we can actually find the guys.
McKeown also clarified why 3 of the men were released from custody.
Not every member of this criminal group had an equal role. So Anthony Robinson quite clearly was engaged in a voluminous number of incidents, but some of the other individuals who were involved may have only participated in one or a few incidents, and therefore they stand in very different shoes in terms of the charging decisions.
And when you do find a criminal, when you do find somebody, a repeat offender, like the guy that we were talking about a little bit earlier, who was targeting multiple different Asian women per day for robberies, you don't really send the message that you're being tough on crime when you let go of his accomplices because they didn't participate in as many crimes per day as this person. Look, I've talked about a lot on this channel how I grew up in an Asian neighborhood, how most of my friends in my personal life are Asian. And if you're saying I'm out there in the audience and I'm Sean's friend, you're not my friend. I would not be friends with anybody who watched my videos, but most of my friends are Asian, so it pains me to know that this is going to get worse because people are invested in denying the problem. People are invested in not reporting the truth. People have so little care for the victims of crimes and such empathy for the criminals that we can't even put out descriptions of the criminals while they're on the loose, and nobody's going to think twice about not running the description after an additional person got stabbed. This is where we are in the United States of America. This is where we are in our major cities. So if you're wondering why Asians are buying pepper spray, why they're lining up around the block in order to defend themselves, it's because they exist in cities where people have lost the will to defend them. Also, what you should really be asking is why these people aren't buying guns or something more significant, because with this level of violence, pepper spray just doesn't seem to be enough. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked the video, you can show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box. This has been me talking about what's going on with the Asian hate. Gave you an update. Till next time.